This is where we belong.
Welcome to podcast number 7 of the We Belong Here podcast, sponsored by the Grinnell Newburgh School Foundation. I'm your host, Dan Walker. Today, my special guest, and I say special guest, is Barb Baker, Director of Advertising, Community Relations with Grinnell Mutual. And I say special, Barb, because I've known you a long time, and I've worked with you in and out of fundraising for back when I was with the fire department to today working with advertising on the live stream. So I feel like you're not only a special guest, but you're a good friend of the Grinnell community, and I appreciate that of you. So welcome to our podcast. As we get started, I've always kind of liked to give a little bit of background on who people are. And when I say Barb Baker, everyone's going to say you don't need to give an introduction, but I like to do that. So can you give our listening audience on the podcast just a brief biography? And I'll put it in a couple different spots. So biography on yourself, including where you grew up. So what was hometown, where you went off to college, what brought you to Grinnell, and if it was marriage of Mike, that's great. Or maybe you guys were married before you came to Grinnell, and then a little bit about your family, and then we'll just kind of let the podcast flow out of that.
Thank you, Dan. I am very happy to be here today. I appreciate you inviting me, and thanks for that wonderful introduction. It's a little bit heady, but I do think that some people know who I am in the community. So I grew up in Northeast Iowa, not very far from Decorah, in a town called West Union. That's where my whole family was. My parents were Luther grads and settled in West Union. So it's a great part of the state of Iowa and beautiful up there. And that's what I found out after I left, is how much people appreciated those hills up there. But I went to the University of Iowa and I got a broadcast journalism and communication degree. So I thought my lifelong skill would be in TV broadcasting, and found out that was a lot of hard work. Spent a lot of time on roadsides during blizzard conditions that I'm not sure was my very favorite thing to do, but I did enjoy working for a TV station for a while right out of college. I did marry Mike shortly after we got out of college, and we ended up in Des Moines. I worked for a nonprofit. He worked for an insurance company, and decided that he really wanted to teach and coach. So back to Iowa City and the University of Iowa, where he kind of had a change in his career, landed a really nice job as a school teacher and coach at the Grinnell Newburgh School. So that brought us to Grinnell almost 37 years ago. I said I would be in Grinnell 2 or 3 years, and then I wanted to be back in the big city. I raised my family here. Mike and I have 2 adult now children, a daughter and a son, who are both married with children. So we're blessed with 4 grandchildren and couldn't like that anymore. So I started my job at Grinnell Mutual shortly after Mike started his teaching and coaching in Grinnell. I have had 3 different jobs at Grinnell Mutual, but have continued there for, as I said, almost 37 years. So started in the claims department, became the corporate claims trainer, and then moved into my Director of Advertising and Community Relations position. And I've really been blessed to have that job. A little bit of advertising. I am in charge of all of our corporate advertising at Grinnell Mutual, but the community relations is probably how people know me, how we've gotten acquainted, and what I think allows me to use Grinnell Mutual to support our community.
Well, and I'm gonna put a little side question in that before we get to that, because that's really the topic of why we have you on here today. But there are multiple different boards and different foundations that you interact with. That, and no one could see this, but Barb just kind of stuck her tongue out. But when you go down the list of everything that you interact with, my wife would say you're involved in too much stuff to me, but I looked at what you do, and I'd say, Barb, you're involved in a lot of stuff outside of Grinnell Mutual.
That is true, and I'm going to harken back to my parents. My parents were like that, and I don't think I fell very far from that tree. So coming into the community of Grinnell, a lot of people I worked with at Grinnell Mutual weren't Grinnell residents. And so when I went home at night, it's like, what am I going to do? My husband's off coaching 3 sports, all year long. And I really needed to get involved in the community. So one of the things we'll talk about is Partners in Education. But I have served on grant committees. I serve on several things within the community as far as the Greater Poweshiek Foundation. I have served on the Chamber of Commerce Board. I have helped with an instructional support levy and getting that passed. And then outside of Grinnell, I do serve on a couple state boards. I serve on the ABI Foundation Board, which oversees programs such as Leadership Iowa and Leadership Iowa University and Business Horizons. So if you have anybody in high school or older that needs to be in a leadership program, I'm going to put a plug in for that. I serve on the Iowa Women's Foundation Board and will chair that next year. I serve on the Iowa Sports Foundation Board, which people may be familiar with if they have done a Live Healthy Iowa program or been involved in the summer or winter corporate or senior games.
Which I'm friends with Chuck Long, so every time I run into Chuck, his first thing he says, "Have you ran into Barb lately?" I said, "Well, usually twice a year I talk to Barb for sure." But, and he's always so grateful of that partnership there. He said that, your involvement and just continued involvement of what you do with that. He said, "I don't know what we'd do without Barb." So there's a plug coming back from Chuck Long.
Thank you.
But besides for things that you volunteer for and do that on that side, you are still not only working at Grinnell, but you're still teaching.
I am. So after I had raised my children and felt like I was in a good spot, always in the back of my mind, I'd wanted to get my master's degree. So I went ahead and got my master's degree and then really wasn't sure what I was going to do with that. Through the Leadership Iowa program, I bumped into some classmates and they encouraged me to apply to teach at the University of Iowa. So I have done that for 12, maybe 13 years now. So not every semester do I teach, but a lot of times in the fall and sometimes in the spring. I teach a business communications class through the Tippie College of Business. And what we do with that class is really teach juniors and seniors in college about what they're going to do when they leave school and get into their business world. So everything from how to interview to how to write your resume to how to work with a team of people that you may not know or may not necessarily get along with.
Right,
so we do that. We do presentations, and their least favorite thing that I really impart to them is how to write an email, how to write a business email. So I really enjoy teaching. It's not my background. I am married to a teacher. My parents were teachers, but it wasn't anything that I really thought that I would do, but really enjoy working at the University of Iowa and working with those students and hearing back from them when they do get into their post-college careers saying, "I'm really glad I learned that."
Right. Well, I think that there's a lot to go hand in hand with when you go and you're in college and you have an instructor that may be the same instructor that's on the board year in, year out. But when they have somebody that comes from the outside that is a true business leader in the communities and in the state, and as functional as you are in different activities, you could apply that to so many different people that they could take that and say, "This is someone I want to listen to," or I could get good benefit out of it. So as a student or someone who's listening, I think that's something that they really enjoy.
And I've learned they don't always like to listen to me lecture, so I have a lot of guests that come in and speak to them about business careers as well.
Well, that's okay too. In my years, I did 25 years of adult education through the fire service, and I found that there's sometimes like that. It is best to have somebody come out because they do get a little bit bored. But it's always what makes a better quality instructor is when you could have that different flavor and interact. That's what they tend to take more away from it. So after we've made through this big list, and I knew that you'd done a lot of things, but I was impressed of what was on your list of different things that you'd taken care of and been involved in. But the most important thing that I wanted to have you here today and through the GNSF Foundation was your handshake, our partnership that over 80 years, not 80 years ago, 1980, when the Partners in Education program started, was how Grinnell Mutual was one of the first ones that had that relationship with Grinnell High School, or the Grinnell Newburgh school system, which actually was directed towards the Grinnell Middle School, is where it started with.
Correct. Thank you. And I will say, when I end my career at Grinnell Mutual, certainly our Partners in Education program is one of the things that will stand out to me. And I'm really proud of what my company has done and what they've allowed me to do in keeping that partnership going. And as you mentioned, it started in the 80s. And we've had some ebbs and flows, but Grinnell Mutual and the middle school have never separated, have never taken a pause. We've been strong partners. We have a committee that's made up of Grinnell Mutual employees. Some are parents of middle schoolers, some are not. My children were in middle school a long, long time ago, and I've hung on to being on that committee. But we have a lot of good members who have an interest in what happens at the middle school and seeing that that particular school is successful. So we've cultivated that relationship. The middle school also has a team of teachers and faculty members who serve on that committee. So we meet. We used to meet monthly, and then we decided when COVID hit, we could meet without seeing each other in person, and we've kind of slowed down our actual number of meetings, but we meet quarterly, or more often, I would say every couple months, and get together and talk about what Grinnell Mutual can maybe do to help the middle school and what the middle school can do to support Grinnell Mutual as well. So I don't want people to think that it's just a one-way street with our partnership. So we do some financial donations to the middle school. We do some in-kind donations. I have 2 cases of hand sanitizer and a lot of boxes of tissues sitting on my front step that need to go. But sometimes the school says we really need some supplies, and Grinnell Mutual talks about it as a committee. It says, is this something that we want to do? We support some initiatives with the school. We've helped revamp the playground. We've donated when they needed a new bike rack for the students. And so although I say it's not always money, some of those things cost money, and there's not always money available for things that they need. So we hope to supply that. We supply manpower if they need help with supervisors for field trips. If they need mentors. For a long time, we had somebody from Grinnell Mutual who actually ran the chess club at the middle school.
Interesting.
So we've done some volunteer things with them, everything from helping with concession stands to helping with book fairs. And then what the middle school does for Grinnell Mutual is they provide volunteers when it's time for us to do highway cleanup. So for years and years, twice a year, we'll take the middle school students and we go out and clean up that stretch of Highway 146. And the kids really enjoy it. Yes. The adults we kind of drag along, but it's kind of a fun thing for them. Also, the music department, the band and vocal instructors at the middle school, every year will bring out 2 groups to perform for our Grinnell Mutual employees during the holidays. Oh. So that's been really fun. They get to come out and see Grinnell Mutual, and they think it's great to have the band and choir come out, get a little bit of time out of school, but our employees really enjoy that. We'll have refreshments, and they get to spend a little bit of time listening to the performances. So those types of things are just as important, and it really makes it a two-way street.
Right. Well, so in the last couple of weeks, we've talked about different ages of schools. So that would have been, if it was in the 80s or early 80s, the middle school was new in 79. So do you remember it would have been shortly after that Partner in Education probably got started?
Probably, and I wasn't here quite then. We didn't move to town until the late 80s. So The organization was established, and I'll put in a plug for the Grinnell Mayor, Dan Agnew. He became president of Grinnell Mutual in the early 1990s and really made sure that we kept that partnership strong. And in addition to supporting the middle school and everything they have going on. And it's such a transitional period. It used to be 3 elementaries fed into the middle school. So all those students from Grinnell were coming together. And what our partnership wanted to help do is maybe ease that transition of all of those students coming together. So we would throw a party, and now we have a picnic for the 5th graders. They've been together for a few years, but that's what we did. But Dan just really made sure that partnership was a strong thing, and wanted the people at Grinnell Mutual to realize how important something like that was in supporting the school.
And my plug for Dan is he still continues that today as mayor.
Absolutely, he does. Absolutely.
100%.
I think there's just a smooth transition to go from Grinnell Mutual into being the mayor. But you and I talked a little bit about what goes beyond that. And so I would just like to talk about, at one point, some of the businesses that were serving as partners in education with the other schools in Grinnell started to go away, whether they closed down or didn't have the funds, or, as we mentioned, the phone company, split and was sold off. I think that Grinnell Mutual has been instrumental in bringing the schools together and the administration of the schools and looking for creative ways to continue those partnerships, whether we found a new business or collaborated with other businesses around to make sure that those other schools have support too, because we don't want them to feel left out or jealous because we're supporting one school. We can't stretch quite thin enough to be the partner in education for all the schools, but I think that's just vitally important to the health of the community to make sure that the schools have some kind of support.
So when the collaboration of the partners in education started, did all the businesses collaborate together to share ideas, or was it still you had a school and that's what you supported and it kind of was segregated?
Yeah.
Each one went in a different direction.
So I don't know that we really collaborated. I think it was a little bit more siloed. But when I took over chairing the committee for Grinnell Mutual for the middle school, I realized that some of the other teachers, staff members in the community associated with the other schools didn't have the relationship that we had. I don't know if I was naive or didn't pay attention or what the deal was, but it's like, oh, you mean everybody doesn't do this? And then I saw, our phone company evolved, and that was a big partnership with the high school. And we decided, let's just get everybody together and talk about this and see what we can do. We had a Hy-Vee manager who I know was getting pulled in different directions to help here, help there, and not that we needed to remain siloed, but when you're getting pulled in every direction, it's like, do we have an organization in town that would be willing to partner with the school? And it doesn't, like I said, it doesn't always have to be financial, but for volunteers, for book readers, for chaperones, those types of things, rather than the school have to go all over the community looking for that. Is there a way that we can make that a little bit better?
Right. Well, I know that we're both involved in the chamber, and that the last chamber luncheon that we had, and it was interesting. It was one of my first ones that I went to, that on both sides of me, I had the manager from Hy-Vee and I had the manager from Walmart, and the representative for the school was Josh Smith. He said, I pulled the straw for today. Well, he had both sides of him, that both managers are saying, well, we've done this, we've moved things, we have stuff that we want to donate, where can we bring it to? And Josh was being tasked with questions that were probably more for older kids than younger kids, and trying to make it up. So it's one of those things that I think maybe that we could approach Rachel, that maybe there is a part of the chamber we could make a silo that start to foster this partner in education back out of businesses and create a new group that would maybe kind of put it in the right direction. Because I think there's interest. Like I said, they don't know what to do. They want to help. They just don't know where to go with it.
Yep. And we do know that businesses around the community have different strengths that they can bring to the schools. Maybe it's manpower, and so somebody like Bayer provides manpower if there's some of that needed. We don't have a lot of employees who come into Grinnell Mutual on a regular basis, so we don't have that physical presence as much. But if somebody needs cases of water for an event, that might not be a Grinnell Mutual thing. That might be better served by one of our local grocers or Walmart. So we have started that process a little bit too, just trying to put together what best resources different entities in the community have and how we can leverage that when there's a need at one of the schools. I don't think it's fair for our teachers to be out fundraising, to have to take their class on a field trip or get a donation for something that they want to do. And if we can funnel their needs through the schools to a group who's got some resources, that's my next project.
Yeah, and I don't even really need to ask you what is your future, because you just told me what your future is right there. And I think that there's enough partners that you and I have been on different, group talks or communications, that there's plenty of people that are willing to open up the conversation more, once we get past maybe a big hurdle and tomorrow. But
yeah.
We've
got our fingers crossed.
We've
got a task to do there.
Crossed.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, as we talk about everything that you just kind of outlined of the Partners Education and where we have been, I think there is still, like you said, many opportunities to move forward. Is there anything that you think that we could go bigger and better with?
There's always an opportunity to go bigger and better. That kind of, Dan and I are smiling at each other. But yes, of course, there are. Do I have all the answers? Absolutely not. We have approached Lisa Beams with some ideas that we have, and she has just been a tremendous resource. I am so thankful that she came to our community and has agreed to be our superintendent for another year. But she's got a big task right now, so I've kind of left this off her plate for now, but we'll circle back. And just making sure that, as you said, organizations that have time and talent and resources that they are willing to give to the school and maybe just don't know that there's a need or how to do that. We're continuing to work, the group I mentioned, college and community members, some of the entities from our local businesses, figure out ways that we can channel what the needs are and see what we can take care of. We're not going to be able to solve every problem, but there is a giving closet at the middle school. And so what they do is they try and have personal hygiene and food and some clothing items. They get really nice donations. The kids bring in donations. Community members give donations. But I think part of my responsibility for Partners in Education is, what are you missing? Is there something that we can do? And maybe we have a food drive or a clothing drive or a mitten drive at Grinnell Mutual, and it's a simple way to involve our employees and recognize some of those needs and try and take care of that. So those types of things, I think, just the little things that sometimes we overlook or forget about and can easily solve an issue.
Right. Well, and I know that particular thing that you just described, so at Davis School where my wife works, there is 2 people that come in every year with winter coats. They call and ask what's the general size of the coats that are worn, and they'll just bring in X coats.
Yep.
Same thing with sneakers, tennis shoes. They'll ask what is kind of a general size and bring those in. And they have their own little closet. And then there's a couple that they'll bring in a Walmart gift card and said, it's the things we don't know what, but if you need it, you go get it. And they use that. So I think the generosity revolves around all the schools, and everyone thinks that they have to wait and be asked for something. And I think our school district, if they take example of the clothes closet, kind of like you talked about, the middle school and the one that's at Davis, that they should just know that at any time the schools are willing to take whatever you want to give them, as long as it mostly is new. And, I go back and I look at, go out to Walmart, or you go to somewhere that's selling clothes and they have stuff on clothes out 50% off. It's like, what a better opportunity to capitalize on buying something and giving it, and it is brand new.
Yep.
And people could benefit from it. There may be some years, Lori said, that 2 coats will go out of the coat closet, but then the next year, there may be everyone will go out.
And they really don't go out of style. And
No.
You're absolutely correct, Dan. And I talk about the businesses in town because I am in a position that I can reach out to those businesses. We have generous community members, and it's amazing to me, whether it's church groups or community meals or the school lunch fund, or as you said, somebody just bringing in clothing. Snow pants is another thing.
Right.
Coats are good.
Yep,
Snow
snow
pants are
pants,
really
exactly.
good. Yeah, and mittens that are not the dollar thin kind, but some mittens that kids can go out and play in the snow in. I know the generosity is there, and you're right. Sometimes people just don't know how to give that, but when we had an audience of 500 people at Grinnell Mutual every day, we could do a good fun, a nice food drive like no other. You know,
Right.
we took boxes and boxes and boxes, and taking that out of the community, I feel a little bad about. So I want to make sure that we are still supporting our schools as best we can, and that's going to keep Grinnell Mutual in business too. And every president in our company that I have heard speak will tell you how important it is to make sure that we have good schools and a community hospital. And those are passions that I am, strong about. I can do something about the schools. I can't really do too much about the hospital at this point, but certainly by, I think, collaborating with the other entities in the community that have some resources they can put towards that is just really a passion of mine.
Right. Well, and not only the education, and this was to me just because I look at them every summer, and I'm so thankful that our softball and baseball fields look great, but the mesh backstops that you guys provided for the baseball and softball fields, it improves the aesthetics of when people come to Grinnell. We look at our schools. We have people come in for speech competitions, listen to our music programs, and even inside sports. So the aesthetics that we leave the school, so it looks great.
Yep.
But even when they come to our outside grounds and they walk into our baseball diamonds, softball diamonds, and they sit down I think that was 2 years ago, 2 or 3 years ago,
Probably.
that the back mesh stops, some of them were partial and some of them were, tore up, but some of them were just look straight through. That Grinnell Mutual provided that on both the baseball and softball fields, and it just brings the class that it looks nice and pleasant. That when you sit in your stands, I'm sure there's people looking outfield say, I got to look through this mesh thing, or they move it aside. But as we sit there and look at it from the video camera, it really makes Grinnell Fields look high class.
I agree.
So,
I agree. And that probably wasn't an idea that just popped into my head. I'm sure I saw it somewhere else, and I'm sure Chris Kaufman cringes every time he sees my number come up on his phone. But if there are things that we can do and partner with, that's my responsibility. That's in my job description. So I am glad to do that. Right now we're working on a middle school project to kind of do some upgrades in the gymnasium. Again, it's the middle school, so it's kind of an easy ask.
Yep.
And like I said, we don't always say yes to everything, but if it's something that makes sense and we know it will help the school, that's what we're going to do. And if I need more resources than what I have with my own company, there are organizations and Grinnell College and Greater Poweshiek Community Foundation that I can call and say, hey, what can you do to help with this too? So we work really well together.
Right. Well, and we are, from my standpoint of the Tiger Sports live stream, we're forever blessed because you have helped me in a couple different ways of helping with advertising and education in advertising. That as someone starting a new business, that I didn't really know the insides and outs. So your help goes in many different ways, and I appreciate that very much.
Absolutely.
Well, obviously that after what we talked about, and I hope everyone takes this away from this podcast, that the schools truly cannot do everything all by themselves, and partners with Grinnell Mutual and other businesses that have been in the past. If we take those away, I think people would obviously see the void. And we greatly appreciate that. So as always, I always am sitting down and visiting with you, and most of the time we go to meetings and you and I have a sidebar conversation before we start into the meeting that we're in. But I think this is just a great example of the title of this podcast of we all belong here, and Grinnell Mutual is a big part of belonging here. And I'm going to say Barb Baker is a good part of we belong here because of everything else that you do. I mean, it's not overlooked. I mean, if anyone looks at the different organizations that you're involved with, from the different foundations and where you would happen to see Barb Baker's name, you're involved in it. And we appreciate that a lot, coming from the standpoint of the Grinnell Newburgh School Foundation, of what the purpose of what they do to support the schools, but just the overall general concept. And we're glad you're here. So
thank you very much. Yeah, that makes me feel good. But, a lot of it, the credit goes to Grinnell Mutual and the leadership that we have that allow me to do this. Now, once this podcast gets out, things may change, but
no, not
but,
one bit at all.
And there are so many others. I would like to name them, but I would miss somebody and then I would feel really badly. But there's so many good organizations in this community along with Grinnell Mutual, and the fact that we can collaborate and feel very comfortable in picking up the phone and calling one of our counterparts. It's not competitive, it's collaborative. So I thank you for allowing me to come in and talk about my passions.
Well, we appreciate and taking the time out of your busy schedule today. I'm sure I'm one of 3 or 4 meetings that was in your day, and I appreciate that. So for our special guest, Barb Baker, I'd like to thank you again. I am your host, Dan Walker, and we will see you next week on the We Belong Here podcast, sponsored by the Grinnell Newburgh School Foundation. See you next week.